Hi.
Hi, can you hear me?
I weird.
I can see you and I see that you're moving a little bit. Can you hear me okay at this
We
point?
can hear you now. Yep.
Okay, great. And can you see me?
Yes.
Okay, good. All right, let's try this again. Hello, everybody. Thank you for your patience as we work through these these little adjustments. Being the first time that we're doing this from such a far distance, I really appreciate your patience today as we move through. Thank you so much for everybody being here. I miss you all. I understand you're having a wonderful morning, and I'm so grateful that you are there at the ashram. So let's sit tall and close the eyes. Take a breath in and a breath out. And just allow your seat to be established. Allow your presence to be grounded. Allow your heart and your consciousness to be anchored in this moment. And then setting an intention for community, for unity, for learning and uplifting, and for the end of suffering for all beings everywhere. And draw the hands together in front of the heart. And we'll lift our voices in one Om, and then I will chant through the invocatory mantras. And if you know them, of course, join in. Taking a breath in for Om. Om. Gananantva Ganapatigam Havamahe Kavim Kavinam Upamashravastamam Jyestarajam Brahmanan Brahmanaspata Anaf Shrinvanuti Pisidha Sadhanam Mahaganapataye Namaha Prano Devi Saraswati Vache Pirvajini Vati Dhinama Vitriyavatu Ano Devo Brahataf Parvata Da Saraswati Ajata Gantu Yagnyam Pavan Devi Jujushana Kritachi Shagman Nova Chamushati Shrinotu Vagdevyai Namaha. May we be protected. May we be nourished. May there be an alleviation of suffering for all beings everywhere. May our hearts be inspired to grow and flourish. And then fluttering the eyes open, releasing the hands down into the lap. And so here it's a little bit later than what it is there. It's 10:30-ish your time. And here it's about 3:30. And so this morning was the first morning that we did not have tremendous rain. We've been getting a lot of rain. It's the rainy season here right now. But this morning when I woke up, it was a pretty blue sky. And so I thought, well, it's a great day to go for a ride. So I went down to Galway City. I went down to have breakfast and to just look around for a few things that I need here at the house. And so I'm not overly familiar with Galway, just a little bit familiar. I've been there a few times. And as I was driving my left-handed clutch of a car, I came to a moment where I didn't know exactly how to get to where I was going. And I seemed to be trapped on this one road, unable to make a left or a right in order to get closer to my destination. And as I was driving, I was thinking about a few things, including today's wisdom circle. And I thought, well, isn't this just the most practical application of the teachings? Isn't sitting here in this traffic where I have this choice of either being distressed about my situation, I'm in a city where I'm not exactly sure how to get where I want to go or how to drive this left-handed clutch, although I'm doing pretty well with it. I have the choice to either be upset or to recognize that my only purpose in this moment is to find my way. That's my only purpose, is to find my way. Wherever I find myself, my only purpose in that moment is to find my way. And to find my way where? Well, home to myself. And so whether I could make a right-hand turn or make a left-hand turn, some people might suggest that everything is going to happen exactly as it's meant to. And I agree with that. I think we have a little bit of influence, but not very much at all. But even more importantly, no matter where it is that we find ourselves, no matter where it is that what direction we find ourselves driving or walking or thinking, ultimately in that moment, the only purpose that we have is to find our way home to ourselves, to our true self, to peace, to the peace within, and to that connection with divinity. We spend a lot of time contemplating on the concept of being lost. I feel lost. I feel disconnected as an example of lost. I feel lack of purpose, another form of lost. I feel angry, confused, another forms of lost. And so this experience of lost is actually a statement. I have forgotten my purpose. I've forgotten that the only reason that I'm here in any moment at all is to find my way. Whether it's difficult or it's easy or it's somewhere in between. In moments where we're angry, our purpose is to find our way through the anger. When we are frustrated, our purpose is to find our way through the frustration. When we're faced with a dilemma, our purpose is to find our way through whatever dilemma we are facing in the best way possible, and in a way that does not take us too much further away from ourselves. In the teachings, we talk about detachment and attachment and grasping and letting go. And these terms are really kind of misapplied a lot of the time. We use them as a convenience. We're like, well, that person irritated me. That relationship doesn't serve me, so I need to let that person go. That's not what it is, though. When we talk about non-attachment, detachment, or letting go, what we're saying is, I recognize that me, adhering to my fear, adhering to my anger, supergluing myself to my harsh negative tendencies, that these things are not conducive to remembering my purpose, which is simply to find my way as compassionately as I can. We don't have to superglue ourselves to our tendencies. We don't need to continually react. We can find ways to respond instead. And so as I was on M6 going south, I thought to myself, well, I could try to get over to the right or get over to the left, or I could make an illegal left turn, which I decided not to do. I said to myself, instead, let me just go forward and see what's down that way. Maybe there's something really interesting to look at. And sure enough, 500 feet down the road, I knew exactly where I was, you know. And this is what happens as we go through our days. It's like we come upon what initially seems like an unfamiliar circumstance. But as we move through that circumstance, we find out that it's actually quite familiar, that we're very familiar with the emotions that are showing up, with the tendencies that are showing up, both from ourselves and from other people around us. And that if we just accept where we are in a given moment, we have a better chance of finding our way through it, using more inspiring tools, using a greater vision. I've been rereading, as I often do, Swami Satchidananda's little book on what is an ashram, you know. And I've been away from the ashram, and I've been missing the ashram since I've been away, but I'm called to purpose where I am. But one of the things that he talked about in this little book that he wrote was this idea of creating heaven where you are. And it's not a false idea based in rose-colored glasses. It's a choice based in the exercise of your own free will. That if peace and happiness have a great importance to you, if unity and compassion have a deep, profound meaning to you, then you can, in any moment, exercise your free will to turn to that emotion rather than the anger, the separation, the hate, the frustration. You can, as it were, if you're feeling angry or frustrated, bathe those emotions with compassion. You can choose to do that. So many times people will say things like, well, it's my freedom to be angry. And yeah, it is your freedom to be angry. So you're exercising your freedom to invest in your anger. Why are you complaining about it? If you don't like what you're making your investment in, then change your investment. The more that we invest in our anger, the more that we invest in our frustration, the more that we invest in our confusion, the more we invest in our complaints, the more we invest in gossip, the more we invest in violence of any sort, the less likely we are to remember that wherever it is that we find ourselves, the sole purpose of being there is to find our way back to the truth of ourselves. But the more we take our energy and we move it toward friendliness, kindness, indifference, and joy, the easier it will be in the more difficult moments to say to yourself, in this moment, my only purpose is to find my way. We have two concepts in this tradition of yoga and Advaita Vedanta and Hinduism at large, Sanatana Dharma. One is searching and the other is inquiry. A lot of individuals use the word searching. Spiritually, I'm searching for something. Now, whenever they use that word searching, I always get the impression that they are on a treasure hunt and that they're following a map, and that map is leading them somewhere over there or somewhere over there or somewhere back there. But where it's not leading them on their search is here, to the heart of their own being. When we come into a place of dharmic intention, dharma meaning duty, and of course intention, in that each moment, my sole responsibility is to find my way. It becomes an inquiry rather than a search. And the inquiry is self-responsibility, svadhyaya. It is coming home to the self and asking, the way I'm dealing with this right now, the way I'm facing the world right now, the way I'm walking through the world right now, the way I'm talking about people right now, the way I'm talking about myself right now, is this all bringing me closer to myself, or is it taking me further away? When we're searching for something outside of ourselves, when we're trying to follow every single street sign as a direction of where we're supposed to be, ultimately, we cannot be highly invested in those internal questions because all of our energy is going out. But when we start asking questions about our internal nature, then that sets us right in the direction of returning to the truth of the self, that inquiry. Who am I? What am I? What is my purpose here? What is my dharma? Wherever I find myself, how am I to be of service? Wherever I go, whatever I see, how am I to see divinity there? And how does all of this relate to my life? And so the first thing that I wanted to touch on today was this idea that wherever you find yourself, that your only responsibility in that moment is to further find your way. And that when we're searching for a way, that's generally externalized, taking all of that energy that you have and that you value so much and sending it out. Whereas when you turn it inward, when you inquire within, then that is a conservation of energy. And that energy can place you profoundly and deeply in a place of self-inquiry. And inquiry about your relationship with divinity, relationship with God. And then adding on that, how does this moment by moment purpose relate to your life? What does it even mean? Some people can get pretty complicated about it. But basically, if we can come through this life, no matter whether we live a day or 100 years, if we can come through this life and have a glimpse of pure peace, a glimpse of the pure light that exists within the heart of your own self, a glimpse of your potential to love, to be kind, to be generous, to be present, a glimpse of the nature of the beautiful abundance that exists within us, then that will be a life. I suppose we could call it well-lived, but it will be a life of inspiration, a life of contemplation, a life of service, and a life of deeper inquiry. This inquiry that I keep coming back to in today's conversation, Krishna talks about it in the Bhagavad Gita a lot. There are so many quotes that we could bring up in the Bhagavad Gita about this self-inquiry. And he says, basically to Arjuna, keep your mind concentrated on me. Keep your mind concentrated on me. Those who keep their mind concentrated on me will find me. They don't need to look very far at all, because he's right here in the heart of the matter. And if you use the name Durga or Kali or Christ or any other name, it's the same thing. Just keep your mind fixed on that. And no matter where you find your physical self, the heart of your spiritual self and that which you adore will never be far from one another. They'll never be separated. In verse 22 of chapter 9 of the Bhagavad Gita, it says, there are those who always think of me and engage in exclusive devotion to me. To them, whose minds are always absorbed in me, I provide what they lack and preserve what they already possess. Provide what they lack and preserve what they already possess. And what they already possess is knowledge of the truth of the self, tattva bodha. And that becomes preserved. And in truth of the self, in tattva bodha, there is no lacking. There is an understanding of the role that emotions play, like anger and frustration, and there's no overbearance to them. There's no attachment to them. There's not an attachment to violence, because when one is in a state of tattva bodha, when one is in a state of the truth of the self, they would not be harmful to another human being because it's just imperceivable. It's imperceivable to act on rage or jealousy or greed or fear. It's unperceivable. In a state of Tattva Bodha, the being, the student, the individual sees themselves as more than part of this flowing universe. They see themselves, and they don't even see themselves. This is the interesting thing. It's like this English language has such limitations. They know themselves to be this universe. And as such, there's nothing that they need because they already possess everything. It's a very beautiful affirmation of the potential of this life. Because in many moments, we find ourselves needing to make a left-hand turn, but we're all the way over in the right-hand turn only lane. Sometimes we drive north when we need to actually be driving south. And sometimes we find ourselves in a left-handed clutch car versus an automatic. Each one of those. The question is, where do we, or how do we perceive where we are in that moment? We can even apply it to situations that are much more grievous, much more intense. In the middle of an argument, a heated argument with someone. I'm standing here with this individual. What is my purpose here? My purpose is to find my way through to myself. So that means name calling is antithetical to that. Egging on is antithetical to that. Blaming is antithetical to that. Externalizing is antithetical to that. Of course, you can have conversations about things, absolutely. But oftentimes those conversations get so blown out of proportion and misunderstood. Everybody thinks they know what everybody else is saying, and yet nobody is listening. So then you just stop. Just stop. And remind yourself, in this moment, my responsibility is to find my way home to myself. Let me turn around and look in my mirror and ask myself, what am I responsible for? And how do I bring the most inspiring qualities to the surface here? Not necessarily so other people will look and be like, oh my gosh, you're so full of peace. It doesn't really matter what other people think of you. I love when Swamiji used to say, MYOB, mind your own business. It's not my business what other people think of me. It's not my business what they don't think of me. It's not my business. My business is only how I relate to the self within myself, to the Atman. That is my business. And then my second business is that I do not harm you. That is my business. But it is not my business how you perceive my actions. If you gossip about them, or if you find them to be too personal or insulting or something along those lines, because I can't control that. I can't control how another individual receives. That's not up to me. That's up to their karma. And that's up to their life experience and their condition in the moment. It's up to so many things, how they slept last night, so many things. So it's not up to me to construct my words, my languaging in such a way as to make anyone else happy. It's only up to me to construct my thoughts and my intentions in such a way that it brings me home again. In the easy moments, the neutral moments, and the difficult moments. So we're at about 11, I guess it is. Let's take a moment there and just ask if there's any reflections or questions that anyone has right now. And Casey?
Volume's on. Can you hear us?
Yes. Mm-hmm. Okay. Are there any questions or reflections at this point? None?
Your
I can't see
background
anybody's hand up. Who was that?
Your background looks nice. That's my
It's a curtain.
Yeah. Yeah, it's lovely to have you here.
Oh, it's lovely to be here. It's lovely to be here. It truly is. And I love the pictures of Sansa, so keep her coming. Yeah. So what do you all think? Do you think it's easy to always remember that your purpose in this moment is to find your way? Hmm. If you have a question, you can just say it, but say it a little loudly because I might not be able to hear so well, especially those sitting in the back.
With practice, it's
Mhm.
it's a little easier.
Mhm.
You start to
Yeah, the
remember.
practice. Yeah. If there's no questions right now or reflections, Casey, you can mute again, and then I'll continue.
I do have some.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Practice, obviously. I find myself recently in trying to resolve dilemmas with other people and feeling I know my intentions are pure and the reception of other people's perception on what is going on. And I don't always feel the need to explain myself. Like I really do feel like at times it's their perception and their stuff they're bringing in, but it muddles the situation. And
Mhm.
at what point is it right to say I've not that it's argumentative, like I've said my piece. This is how I presented myself. You're perceiving it a different way, but it almost feels like for me to move forward, I'm not honoring myself to help them understand. And this just it's difficult. That's uncomfortable.
Yeah.
It is uncomfortable because I want there to be understanding, but I don't know if it's possible on the other side. So it's that conflict of letting go. I don't know what I'm really asking, but it's the question's there.
It's a great question, and it's a great conversation, because no, you can never guarantee anybody understands anything that you say or do. It's just not possible. They might even tell you that, oh, I totally get it. I totally understand. But then their mind works the same as your mind. So their mind is going over the 10,000 possible things you could have meant, while their intellect is trying to talk them into believing one or two variations of that. So they're having the same type of internal battle that anybody else would have. So the first thing is, no, we can never be guaranteed that anybody understands what we're saying or why we're saying it. But what we can do is be useful. So be useful to people in our conversations. So that means that thinking about our words and how we're presenting ourselves. People have different temperaments. So for some people, it may support being very, very straightforward with them and just, acknowledging that certain behaviors or tendencies cause you to feel a certain way. So accepting responsibility of that. And then, inquiring if there's any way that there can be a further conversation about this and maybe a change in behavior. But then one must also accept the answer that they receive, right? So they may be hearing you, they may understand what you're talking about to some degree, but they're going to have their own answer to the circumstance. And so we need to be prepared to accept that. It may not be in line with what we want. The other thing is in being useful to other people, it might be less about, do they understand me? Do they like what I'm saying? Do they agree with what I'm saying? And more about, is this a teaching moment? In even the smallest of way, the littlest of seeds can I plant right now? The littlest of seeds. And I found this approach to be absolutely dynamic and purposeful, is that when I'm speaking with people, I will attempt to see every conversation as, difficult conversation that is, as a teaching moment where maybe I plant the smallest little seed without saying I'm planting a seed, right? So it might be storytelling. It might be based in scriptural quotation, which is huge. So, they can fight with you, they can argue with you, they can disagree with you, but it's a little bit more challenging to disagree with the scripture that they follow, if in fact they follow one, or something that they find profoundly moving, like maybe they are, a Rumi reader or an Eknath Eshwaran adherent. And so, if you know this about them, you can always use what it is that they study, as part of the conversation to plant a seed that perhaps will inspire them at some point in time to grow, to contemplate on if they were harmful in a moment. And I've had people actually come back, and one really profound that comes to the front of my mind right now, an individual who came back to me about 3 years after a conversation. We had this conversation, and it was a beautiful conversation. There really wasn't, I wasn't reacting to anything. There was no anger or anything in this conversation, but this person was very much upset, very, very sad about another circumstance in their life, and about a troublesome relationship that they had, which was a business relationship. And all I suggested to them was, at some point in time, if we make the decision with our free will that we're going to walk this path, that we're going to knowingly walk this path, because we're always walking it, whether we know it or not, but we're knowingly going to walk this path of compassion, of unity, of learning about ourselves, of nonviolence and truthfulness, then at some point in time, we have to take an inventory, and we need to ask ourselves, how much of myself am I selling out in my relationship with other people who are asking me to hide that part of myself? We need to say, is that being true to my intention? Is that being, that might be a relationship that has to change. You don't have to end the relationship, but you do need to have a healthy boundary within that relationship. So at any rate, we had this conversation. I'm paraphrasing greatly. I'm sure I was much more eloquent at that point in time. And the person, it was time for them to head out. So they did. And they said, oh, I'll be back very soon. I can't wait to talk to you again. I didn't hear from them for 3 years. 3 years. And then out of the blue, I got an email. And the email simply said, I just wanted you to know, I know you haven't heard from me in quite a while, but I've never forgotten the conversation that we had. And I'm finally at a point in my life where I'm going to act on the seed that was planted. And I just want you to know that your words weren't wasted. So whether she chose to act on it or not, that's her business. My business is that in that conversation, I did my very best to be useful, rather than to be retaliating or harmful or reactive or any of these things. And that sometimes is a huge help in dealing with individuals who, might be difficult to deal with, or where we're just not sure we're getting through. It's like, we don't need to get through. We don't do the work. I'm sorry. We are not the dictators of the outcome, is what I should say. We are not the dictators of the outcome. All we can do is adhere to our Dharma, decide if we're going to adhere to the virtues that this path teaches us, and then apply those virtues studiously and with integrity and sincerity. And then the rest of it will take care of itself. We used to say, I started a program in an at-risk youth school over in New Jersey. And the teachers would sometimes, I was training yoga therapists to come in, and they would come in and do an internship with me at the school. And they would learn how to work with at-risk youth. And they would often come and say, at that point, Sudha, I don't feel like I'm getting through to them. I don't feel like they're listening to me. Some of them fall asleep. Some of them are just like, headphones in their ears, whatever. And I'm just so frustrated. And I said, I understand it's frustrating. But here's what you could remember if you choose to. You're not here to fix these children. You're here to plant seeds that will be useful to them at a future point in time. And you may never even know. You may never know that it ever made a difference. But your faith tells you that if you adhere to these teachings, and if you offer something useful, that it will sprout in its own time. And they will find it to be something purposeful in their life, even if it's not in a way that you ever intended, and even if you never know about it. It's powerful when you take yourself out of the equation like that. When you say, I'm not here to make sure you understand anything, because I don't know what anybody's able to understand in a given moment, it's not up to me. But what I am here to do is to plant seeds. Just plant seeds and keep nourishing the seeds. And eventually the seeds will sprout and they will grow the way they're meant to. Yeah. I hope that was supportive. And if I misunderstood your question or your statement, please share and we can try that again. Yeah.
You hit on a couple things that were spot on. Thank you so much.
Oh, you're very welcome. Anybody else right now with any other thoughts in this moment or questions? It's a little bit difficult to hear because everybody's pretty far away. Can you all hear me okay?
Yeah.
Good. Very good. So I think it's very powerful. As a matter of fact, I know it's very powerful that as we walk through this life, we really do have a tendency to want to be kind of center stage in a way. The one with the answers, the one, that people come to, the one who knows things, the one who is constantly receiving information and giving out information. And that's all fine. And it's all part of being human. But really, that's not the purpose for us being here. The purpose for us being here is self-knowledge. And the thing that's going to allow us to walk through this life in such a way that we're practicing compassion, that we're practicing these beautiful virtues that are laid out for the seeker is staying focused on that self-knowledge. And stop trying to understand why your neighbor's such a grouch. Stop trying to understand why that person, that you sometimes find yourself going out to dinner with is always grouchy and never happy about anything. Just take for granted that there's a few things all human beings have in common. Number one is that we all suffer. We all suffer, every single one of us. And we suffer both unnecessarily and necessarily. And many of you have heard me talk about this many times. You can be certain that whoever is sitting across from you is both suffering unnecessarily and necessarily. Their unnecessary suffering, you may be able to relate to somewhat, but it's a complicated web of their own path. So just see, just see through compassionate eyes that this person is a person who is suffering just like you're suffering, just like everyone in the world is suffering to some degree. And then stop trying to fix them and instead light a light. Now, there's a difference between trying to fix someone and lighting a light. The light that you're lighting is you, your own inner light. And that's not being lit for the purpose of guiding that person. It's being lit for the purpose of coming home to yourself. And a consequence of holding that intention with sincerity might be, there's no guarantee, might be that this person witnesses some part of that and becomes inspired by it. There's no guarantee. It teaches very clearly, we're not promised any kind of an outcome. Nope. We have a claim to the work only, never to the outcome of the work. But if, as all of the great teachers have said, if you conduct your work in line with the virtues, in line with the teachings, in line with compassion, love, unity, whatever it is that is compelling to you in an uplifting and inspiring way, then it's going to make the rest of it so much easier. And it's going to provide a very bright light for the people around you who will both misunderstand you and also be inspired by you, all in the same moment. You cannot control how they perceive. All you can continue to do is be sincere in your heart of hearts. That's all you can do. Harm none, love all. Harm none, serve all. Harm none, see all with compassion. Harm none. Love yourself. Do not harm yourself. Once you open yourself to these teachings, there's a very great dilemma that occurs. The first part of that dilemma is that we have our habits, our habitual behaviors in place. We are reactive to certain things. I'll never forget this. Many of you know I have a very traumatic upbringing, and as a result of that, I was left with severe PTSD and night tremors and a number of different things. And I'll never forget the moment that I realized that there's an aspect of my reaction to things like loud noises, which is completely conscious, which is completely me replaying my own shock, my own upsettedness, my own tendency. Like I saw it happening before it happened, but did not change it. And the moment that I realized that, the moment I became empowered in my own self to change my reaction to more of a response, and then over time to actually rewrite it almost completely. So when you find that you are becoming angry, becoming frustrated, becoming panicky because you're supposed to be making a left-hand turn and you're all the way in that right-hand lane. As soon as you feel that rising up and you stop, recognize it for what it is, and then choose a different tact. Make the right-hand turn. There'll be another U-turn ahead. Choose a different word, one that's softer and kinder. Choose a different perspective, one that is more understanding and inclusive. Give yourself the option to see that you have many, many, many different choices, not just the 3, 4, or 5 that you've been depending on for all these years. And just keep reminding yourself that no matter what moment I find myself in every moment, really my sole responsibility is to find myself, to come home to the innermost self. And once I do, and once you do, the entirety of life changes. Everything changes. Some things are still just as difficult. But generally speaking, as we move along this path of self-inquiry, life becomes much brighter. We breathe much deeper and more patiently. We have a greater resiliency to frustrations. And we also have a greater curiosity about inspiration and creativity and where we find ourselves in a given moment. And instead of having to get out of here to get to something else, we say, what am I overlooking here? Or if I do have to exit, how can I do so in a way that's meaningful to me? All right, we're at the 20 after mark. So once more, I'll ask if there's any reflections or any questions.
Okay, volume's on.
Very good. Any reflections or questions? Sure.
Can you hear me?
Yes, speak just a little bit louder though.
When you mentioned necessary and unnecessary suffering,
Mhm.
it almost reminds me of like your dharma and the karma. Like the unnecessary is maybe suffering you brought upon yourself in some way, and the dharma, the necessary suffering is just something you need to go through in this lifetime
Mhm.
as your path. Yeah.
Absolutely. And so your question is that accurate? Is that what you're saying?
I guess
Mhm.
yes, and like, is that just an appropriate, is that an appropriate way to look at suffering?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. So each one of us has a physical body, and you were born into a physical body, and the act of being born, of birthing, is very painful. It's full of suffering. To come from that space of all-inclusive consciousness into this material world, and the path by which we make that transition, is very painful. Then at the end of this path, we return to that, all-inclusive consciousness. But we have generally become so attached to this world that there's a lot of pain associated with that. And in between, this physical body changes. Maybe it gets sick, maybe it becomes injured. All of these physiological things that happen to us are loaded with pain and suffering. And there's not a lot we can do about that. We were born, therefore we are going to die. And because we're in a physical body, we're going to have some kind of physiological ailments along the way that are going to cause suffering. Now, that's the necessary. The unnecessary suffering is everything that happens in the mind with regard to this embodiment. So this embodiment could be far freer, far more peaceful, far more integrated experience than what we allow it to be, because we use our minds in such a way that the stories we tell ourselves just amplify our suffering. And so just kind of as an example, and I've used this before, so for those of you in the room who have heard it, it's just recent, so it's relevant. I broke my knee earlier this year. I broke my knee. Then that was now in March, I think it was. And yet every so often, like if I go to get down on the floor or up from the floor, I will find myself reflecting on the fact that I broke my knee in March, and that I don't get up and down off the floor the same, that it's actually sometimes a bit painful to do so. And then I become stuck in that thought of, I have pain in my body that was not there before. That's unnecessary. I don't need to have that thought. I just need to address what I can and can't do. But if I was to continue having that thought and mulling it over and mulling it over and mulling it over, it would become an intense part of my life that really, who knows, maybe I would be like, well, I can't do that, and I can't do that, and I can't do that. And then suddenly I would be full of cannots and will nots, instead of looking at life as, this is just another way to experience life. So now let's discover what I can, what I am able to do, and find the joy there, because there's joy in every moment. Hopefully that makes sense. We tend to get stuck in a way that is really unnecessary, and it amplifies our suffering greatly. Back in the day, I was diagnosed with epilepsy, petit mal, not grand mal. And so those overhead lights would really bother me and cause an epileptic seizure. And initially the doctor said to me, well, we're going to have to take your license away for 6 months and da, da, da. And I was like, no, you cannot take my license away. You cannot do this. This is not my diagnosis. I had a reaction to it, an unnecessary reaction. Eventually, through the process of meditation And this is going back now. I guess my kids were really small at that point in time. But well, maybe I guess they were young teenagers at that point in time. Through the process of meditating on this, it came to me, there's nothing for you to be upset about here, because this is just another way to experience life. Now you get to work out muscles that you haven't worked out before, like asking for help and support, like accepting that life is full of limitations when you're in a physical body, like practicing the peace and the patience associated with the teachings that you study in moments where you don't feel peace or patience. That this is actually just another way of experiencing life. It's another series of opportunities coming to you. It doesn't have to be unnecessary suffering. Does that make sense? Did I lose you? Hello.
Thank you. The collective nodding of head.
There you go. It's hard to tell if you're frozen or not. The picture is so tiny. Yeah.
Oh, wait, you were here?
There you go. I see the arms flailing. Any other questions or reflections right now? We're good? Somebody say yes or no. So for this week, if you choose to do so, every time you find that you're not in the lane you intended, or you're in a little bit of a difficult moment, handling a situation that is slightly frustrating, stop and just keep coming back to that thought that what is the purpose of this moment? The purpose of this moment is not to reinforce habitual behaviors that lead me deeper into suffering. The purpose of this moment is to discover within myself freedom, truth, and self-knowledge. And then next week, let me know how it goes. Yeah. All right, let's sit tall. We'll close the eyes. Take a breath in and a breath out. And draw the hands together in front of the heart. And we'll lift our voices in one Om and the All Beings mantra. Take a breath in. Om. Loka samasta sukhino bhavantu. Loka samasta sukhino bhavantu. Loka samasta sukhino bhavantu. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om Shri Guru Pyo Namaha. Hari Om. Now and always honoring your light, the light of all beings everywhere. Om, peace, peace, peace. Thank you so much for being here today. I'm so grateful to see all of you. Be well, and hopefully I'll see you next week. Thank you.